Well, thank you very much. Have you ever wondered how a doctor thinks? Or in other words, how would you know you're thinking like a doctor? Well, today I want to enter into that question, and I'm not going to answer it through my mind of 30 years of experience in medicine. I want to answer it to students' drawings and reflections of how they are beginning to learn to think like a doctor. I would also like to talk about where I became better at thinking like a medical educator through 2 art education programs that I participated in this university over the last number of years. I work in Cork University Maternity Hospital, where 9,000 babies are born every year. 1,200 of those babies are admitted to the Neonatal Intensive Care Unit, some people call it the NICU, and 300 of those babies are premature babies. 100 of them are born at less than 1,500 grams birth weight. Every year, 160 and now climbing up to 180 of our medical students spend a week in the neonatal department. And I need to bring them into my practice during that week. First of all, a neonatologist is a pediatrician who specializes in newborn medicine. So we're the doctors that look after the baby once the baby is born. And my role as medical educator is to bring the students into an authentic learning environment, to start to help them to enter into a periphery of a community and a community of practice in newborn medicine. Now, these students come with some basic knowledge, with their own experiences, but this is a really strange and new environment for them. The 2 programs I spoke about, I will describe briefly as follows. The first one was called Visual Thinking Strategies. And in this workshop, we sat around with a tutor, a group of my colleagues, some of them in this room, and we were asked just 3 simple questions after we had a moment to look at that picture. And the first question was, what do you see? There was usually a pause, and then one member would say, I see 3 children, and on a swing, and in the background, it looks like a war zone. And the tutor would then speak the next very important question, because she said, what do you see that makes you say it's a war zone? And that person might answer, oh, the rubble on the ground, and the apartment block or housing looks like it's blown open, and it's tilting. Somebody else might make another contribution when the tutor said, well, what more do we see? The fundamentals of VTS is therefore to look. It's to look closely, and it's to look for the evidence. I think my students finally get it when I tell them about Dr. Watson and Holmes. And Watson says to Holmes, I see everything you see. I'm there when everything happens, and yet I don't get it. And Holmes says to Watson, the problem, Watson, is that you see, but you do not observe. The second educational project, art program, was called Project Muse. It came from Boston, and it means museums uniting with schools in art education. So curators of museums and art galleries came together with teachers, primary school teachers, and between them, they worked out ways of helping young children to access art. And they came up with 5 entry points. Now, the first entry point was the aesthetic one. And they get questions that the teachers could then ask the children, and they would say, what colors do you see? There's blue, and there's white, and there's grays, and there's bright colors of red. And what do the colors mean might be a follow-on question. And do colors have emotion? Do they demonstrate that something is going on in this picture? The second way to enter into a work of art are through the narratives. And we've heard some narrative about this story already. 3 children, we think, on a swing, they're not happy, and it looks like a war zone. And the other question is, that's the story in the picture, but what's going on outside the picture? Who's not there? Where are the parents? Who's supposed to be looking after these children? So there's lots of stories that we can think about. The third entry point was the logical linear one. What are the lines in a picture? And you'll always see lines. And the one that strikes us right here is that red line that looks like a maypole, but it's not a maypole, and it divides that picture harshly into two. We could talk more about the lines. The fourth entry point, we could just come up to a work of art and say, is this art? And what do we see that makes us say it's art? And if we didn't like it, would it still be art? So the fundamental questions about art and beauty. And we could approach this picture or any work of art to the experiential one. So we've looked at this picture. Could we convert this picture into a video, into a dance, into a story, into a poem? And by converting it, what do we gain from this picture and what do we lose? Now, I'm going to try to show you how I mapped these 5 entry points and the questions from VTS into the way I bring the students on a tour of the neonatal intensive care unit on their first day. So, after introductions, I might do a brief VTS with an image similar to what you've just seen here. And they're beginning to wonder, but they're beginning also to get it. And when we go to the unit, we might stand at the door and the VTS questions come out. What do you see? What more do you see? We also say, well, put yourself in the positions of the parents coming in right now to this entrance. What do they see? Do they see the same things as you? Or does the anxiety influence are they thinking of other things? Their baby, where's their baby? The cot that baby was in last night has moved. You can sense all of the things that could happen when they're coming to the front door. And as we move in, they will comment on a baby, an incubator. Over here, and they don't have any noise. There's no babies crying. It's very quiet. It's a dimmed light. And they will be wondering, why is it so different from other hospital environments? And then we say, well, put yourself inside that incubator. You're lying there. It's warm, 30 degrees. Suddenly the door bangs open, snaps. Somebody comes in, pushes your arm up, sticks in the needle, walks back, leaves the cotton wool on you. You can hear the hum of that incubator all day, all night. Sometimes they put big lights on top of the incubator and shine them right on you. And they're blue lights. You're not getting much sleep. People are awake at you every hour. Maybe on studies have shown 2 or 3 interventions every hour, every day. We move into the unit a little bit more, like a camera moving. And we meet people. We see nurses, doctors, therapists, occupational therapists, physiotherapists, care assistants, and we see the housekeeping staff. And we talk, and we stop to them. And each of them will say, what do you do here? And what has happened to you this morning? And at this point, I often tell the story about President Nixon going to NASA. He's walking along the corridor, and he meets this man who is a janitor. He doesn't know who he is. And he says to him, sir, what do you do here? And the janitor said, Mr. President, I'm putting a man on the moon. And students, I think, with that story are beginning to realize, this hospitals are not about nurses or about doctors. They're about systems, complex systems working together. And the weakest link at any stage can affect the outcome of the baby. We're moving closer to the parents. We introduce ourselves. We ask them to tell the story of their baby, but we ask 2 important questions. And they're questions that I called a review of parental perspectives. Remember, when we look at pictures, we get multiple perspectives. And they're simple questions. The question is, what are your biggest worries about your baby today, right now? And the second question is, what do you understand about your baby's condition? We move in closer, like that camera, and we're looking at the baby. We see information outside, the baby's heart rate, blood pressure, pulse rate, as we've seen in the last presentation. We look in and we can see the baby's name, and we can look at the address and know that they have to travel 40, 50 miles to be with their baby, or else transport the breast milk 40 or 50 miles for their premature baby. We look at the baby and we look at his position, his size, his shape, his activity. And we look at the baby's breathing, and we look at all of the equipment attached onto the small baby, tubes into the mouth, tubes into their nose, electrodes. We are really closely looking at this baby, but we're not touching this baby, and we've really seen so much. And if we remember there was the foundational entry point, which is this art. Well, right now, we can stand back and say, what's going on with this baby? And we can look at this baby from top to bottom, systematically, and see the multiple problems that could be going on. This is an ultrasound machine, and that looks and see if the baby has a bleed into their brain. We also think about the baby's eyes. You know, Stevie Wonder was a premature baby in the 1950s. And while blindness is very rare now in premature babies, that's why he was blind. We come down to their tummies. Are they getting breast milk? We look at their fragile skin. We think about infection. We think about the possibilities of jaundice, other diagnoses, and we think about the parents. What's happening with the parents? What do they understand about this baby? We then move back along outside of the unit now, and we start asking the experiential questions. What did we notice? Or what did you notice this morning? What were you feeling when we were at that cot side? And in a year's time, what will you remember? The interesting thing about 8 or 9 students, each one of them will remember something different. And each one of them will want to tell what they've seen. And each one of them is educating, peer education of the rest of us. And we often ask the question as well, how can we apply what we learned today towards another part of medicine? And has your thinking changed by being here today? Now, I told you I would tell you how doctors begin to think by looking at their pictures and their reflections. The pictures that they draw are very simple. I say, draw a picture of what this morning represented to you. And there would be lots of practical things like hand washing. They would have seen for the first time maybe a mom breastfeeding a baby. They would have seen a mom doing skin-to-skin care, which we call kangaroo care. And they would have seen the phototherapy light shining on the babies who are jaundiced. Lots of practical things. But they say that the purpose of art is to make the familiar strange and the strange familiar. Now, the strange is what they're seeing. It's a huge shock to them. It was not what I expected. It was a shocking place. So many things hit me at the size of the room, the size of the babies, the sounds, the monitors. An endless array of tubes, wires and lines streaming from the walls. The beep of alarms interrupt the bustle of the staff minding busy, tiny lives. It's a lot to digest. I felt a mixture of fear, embarrassment, should I be here, and excitement. This is a new place. I know I will learn some new things here. They demonstrate in their stories about the empathy and distress. It was a week full of emotion, ranging from intense happiness to deep sadness. I couldn't believe the vulnerability, love, and compassion that was so evident in the parents. I felt overwhelmed by the whole situation and unsure of how to act. The baby looked like he was in pain. He clawed at his tube. Attempting to pull it out. I was extremely distressed by the sight. They see the importance of communication. I found this placement to be quite sad at times, but I learned that good communication can make a big difference to the parents. I observed doctors taking a long time to sit with concerned parents. I learned about breaking bad news. It gave me a huge insight into taking a more holistic approach to medicine. This is something I can take with me throughout my career, a transfer of learning. One student talked about the power of touch. I never really comprehended before the power of human touch. Or swaddling a baby could have so much affect their health. It felt amazing to cocoon this tiny newborn between my hands, simulating the uterine environment. I felt I was contributing to the care of the baby. They are now beginning to enter the community of practice. Some of the emotions are strong in another direction. One student, after we had met a baby who had been in hospital 5 weeks after withdrawing from maternal drug of heroin and methadone, she expressed her anger. I was appalled that his mother could have been so selfish to put her own self-perceived needs above the well-being of her infant. And she reflected, I then feel guilty for being so judgmental. But I found it very hard to detach myself from the situation, so I had to learn to deal with the sadness and not let it affect the remainder of my placement. He's a child I still think about. And these are 21-year-old students. And they're seeing things that we really wouldn't want 21-year-olds to be looking at. They're still young people. They're seeing life and they're seeing death. My week in the NICU reminded me that life is precious and valuable. And the student who drew this picture of this container is reflecting, is this an incubator or is it a coffin? Is this baby going to live or going to die? And the other picture was one that I've looked at often myself. And what I see is a mother alone in a big canoe. And I think about passing the river. And I wonder, is this mom so much, despite everyone around her, she's really alone and passing across the river with her baby. One student said, when I heard a doctor say when there is no cure for a baby, all you can do is care. This rang out in my mind the whole day. It somehow answered my long-held dilemma about what doctors do when they cannot cure. We like to think of ourselves not just as an expert team, but as a team of experts. And the students saw that in many of their drawings. And they also saw that the parents were part of the team, and empowering the parents served to relieve anxiety and instill trust. One student quoted Patrick Kavanagh's poem, Advent, about the loss of innocence. And it began in the newness that was in every stale thing when we looked at it as children. And the student reflected, so too, I thought I might have the same affliction, loss of innocence, as I sat looking at the mother, observing the baby with her cleft lip and palate on her father's lap. Something shocking. Are these students beginning to think like doctors? I think in many ways they are. They're showing increased visual literacy. They're showing good the importance of communication, empathy, compassion, the workings of a team in an action, but they are struggling with the loss of innocence and dealing with strong emotions. They're uncertain and they're out of their comfort zone, and that's where we must be there for them. And they're concerned about taking on responsibility. But I think the future is bright for our students, because these are telling you what's going on in their minds. And these students are showing enhanced emotional intelligence, and that's going to stand for them and going to stand for their patient of the future. And somebody said that we have art so that we may not die of reality. Well, I can see these students using art to help them not to die or become disillusioned with the reality that they will see in medicine. Thank you very much.